had another great question from one of our viewers, and I hope you don't mind if I ask you.
No, not at all.
All right. So how will companies, or how can they try to offset their increasing costs associated with the after effects of COVID? I think this is a really great question because a lot of companies are struggling with this right now. Of like, how do we pay for this crisis that we just endured?
Yeah. By the way, can you tell where that question came from?
No.
And like geographically?
Well, U.S.
U.S. Okay. I think that companies are struggling. I mean, we're all struggling with that. I mean, the latest one, recently was, we can't find ketchup. So like now everybody's scrambling to buy ketchup, and, we're going to have in our cupboard a lot of ketchup, a lot of toilet paper, and the market's going to go like this, in terms of pricing for the manufacturers of those things. It's really going to depend on some of these other mechanics that are going on still in the world. Meaning, where are the components being sourced from? What's the regulatory environment? What's the travel restrictions? Because the economic theory, the traditional economic theory would be just raise prices. Everything is going to go up. I mean, we saw this already with things like lumber. You read the economic stories, right, about housing's going up and this and that, and maybe it is in the short term, but the economics eventually balance in such a way that it can't sustain itself because it's not based on anything substantial. It's just based on emotion, if you will. So I think right now you're starting to see, travel is going to probably be the next one as it opens up, right? Everyone's going to want to go on vacation and so prices will seem to go up, but everything's going to come down. I think what's probably most important is that companies are going to have to, the good ones who have a good foresight view of what the world's going to look like in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. I mean, this whole notion that globalization is dead and buried and we're going to go to this, if it's not made here, we don't buy it. That's nonsense. That's not going to happen. I mean, it'll happen in maybe some segments, right? But I mean, you find that, right? I mean, do you always ask like where something is from? I don't know.
Occasionally, it depends on the product.
Right. I mean, so it's going to depend on, what item you have, what the price point was to begin with, what the real demand is. Because I think that's the real key, is that no one's quite sure what the real demand of anything is anymore. I mean, from shoes to clothes to cars, you hear this thing now where cars are expensive because you can't get the chips. All right. But in a year, maybe the car is going to be all electronic anyways. And that's what the market really is going to need. So I think the companies that are in this real, like hazy kind of area are not hazy area, but maybe for them, like what is their market going to look like? They've got to start looking 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 years down the road. What is the technology going to bring? How's it going to look? I mean, again, cars wouldn't even look the same in 10 years. And it's not just because of Tesla and all that. It's because the whole world is going to say, wow, we can do electric cars cheaper, right? And all that. So I think what we're going to see is that this trend towards pricing immediately, it's going to happen. I mean,
but I like what you're saying about how it's not as simplistic as the traditional business model may have led people to believe of, oh, there's demand, we'll just raise prices. It's much more nuanced. Right. And I like where you're going with that.
Well, think about it this way. Think about during the pandemic when all of us around the world were sequestered pretty much at home. We got to learn a different way of living, of entertaining, of all sorts of things, right? And so the things that we used to think were important are pretty much different now than they were 18 months ago. Right. So, I saw something the other day, about some entertainment venue, and it was like, oh, we're back and come join us, and won't this be fun? but the world has moved on from what it was then, right? And so
The interest may not even be there anymore.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, the audience might go, yeah, that was fun, but we've all evolved and we've all changed. And what we thought was fun, you know, being wall-to-wall people in a small room listening to some concert of some kind, people are now going, it doesn't sound like fun anymore.
Yeah.
Fun to me seems like sitting in the park, listening to music on the bandstand where everyone's kind of distanced, even though most people or a lot of people, you know, now are fully inoculated. I mean, does that make sense? I mean,
Yeah.
it's a hard question that to
We're
answer.
all different. We've all changed, and our interests and our priorities have changed too. So what was in demand 2 years ago isn't necessarily something that's going to automatically come back.
Yeah. Do you get a sense from the question that the person asking the question was more in a traditional business or?
I think it was more a traditional business.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was more about, okay, so COVID, we just spent a ton of money. How do we pay for those extra things without alienating customers?
Yeah. I mean, and it's, I mean, again, look at our own buying patterns and you realize, you know, that now here's the other thing. I mean, a year ago, because I consider myself a coffee aficionado, I had coffee stacked up. I could have, the world could have ended. There still would have been coffee, right? And everyone had their thing. Well, it doesn't matter what it is, pastries, donuts, we had freezer fulls of things. And that skewed everything. The demand is skewed, pricing is skewed, you name it. So I think people who are in traditional business, this is why I asked you the question, in traditional businesses, I think it's a lot harder because they're dealing with, like in some cases, decades of history, customer preferences and histories and all these other kind of things. You know, people wanted blue versus green. They wanted yellow versus red, blah, blah, blah. And you see it everywhere. You see it in the retail shops and, you know, they're now coming here in the Northeast. They're starting to come into summer. Well, summer is not what summer used to be. I mean, let's be candid, and right. And so I think it's going to be a wait and see. I think a lot of these companies, by the way, the newer entrepreneurial companies that don't have all that history are saying, throw it out. We don't care anymore. Like, let's take the world as we see it today and let's build from what we see today. And I think we're starting to see that in venture money, where it's going into businesses that think like that, into where people want to work in an environment like that. I mean, heck, you wouldn't want to go back to work in a company that just did everything the same way, blah, 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 right? Nobody wants to do that. You want to go where there's a lot of energy going, yeah, we get it. We got through COVID and we're still here, but the world's still here. It's different. How do we run? Right?
This reminds me a lot of what you were saying the other day on global business development.
Right.
Where it's, you know, how can you take your process and either create new products or find new customers for those products, but it's bigger than that. So how do you offset these costs? Well, find other ways to make money using the processes that you already have, using the products you already have.
Yeah, I mean, don't you think even too, the whole notion of, well, what's the cost? I mean, and again, I don't mean to get into economics deeply, but
that's a good point too.
I mean, that's right. Isn't that part of it? I mean, you say, well, what's your real cost? The cost of what, to do what, where? And so,
if you didn't have those extra costs, you might have lost customers. So it's, yes, you had to spend extra money during the heart of the crisis, but if you hadn't spent that money, how many customers would you have lost?
There you go. Yeah, and looking forward, I mean, what would you ask? I mean, the question is your cost to do what, where, and how. Like,
yeah, you're right. The definition of cost has changed too.
It's changed too, and even the whole notion of all the defined terms in economic strategy is, what's the sale price? What's the shipping cost? These things have all changed. And I think the companies that look at it in the traditional way are going to struggle. they're really going to, no matter how popular the products are, it's the ones that look at it and go, hey, we need a redefinition of almost everything from people skills. I mean, because the skills required are different, right? I mean, I'm sure you've seen that the skills required are different.
It's a different world.
Yeah.
And I think to pretend otherwise is shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah. I mean, there's no doubt. And it's not age related. You know, too often people get into this thing of, well, if you're over 50, you know, you're old school, this, and the other thing. That's really not true. Some of the good thinkers, they're in their 50s and 60s and 70s going, man, I never liked that way anyways. Like, you know, and so we're seeing even in business schools that they're trying to not throw out the traditional view, but just to take it in perspective.
Or open your mind to other perspectives, other views, other ways of doing things.
And the world's much bigger than like this. It's wow. It's like all these different kind of things all at the same time. So yeah, I think that's a good question. And like I said, it's yet to be determined on how it all lands. You know, when we take this rocket ship and land on the moon, what's it really going to look like?
If you like this video, make sure to hit like and subscribe. See you next time.